It's time for Deep Dive 5.0 on the Chicago Blackhawks, where I look at the stats and analytics for Connor Bedard, Seth Jones, and everyone on the roster.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a reminder to go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well. Mailbag Monday is quickly approaching and definitely want to see an uptick in the number of questions compared to last week. So please jump in the comment section with your cue. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, drop your question in the review section along with a 5-star rating. Those always put a big smile on my face. And last but certainly not least, do got to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app or visit FanDuel.com right now to win $200 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at Super Bowl 59. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Opening up things on the show today, it's time for Deep Dive 5.0 on the Chicago Blackhawks, as we're now 52 games through the 2024-2025 regular season. Time for Deep Dive 5.0, starting with the Blackhawks forward groups. Kicking things off is none other than number 98, Connor Bedard. Going to be going through all of the forwards, stats, and analytics here on segment 1. Segment 2 will be all about the defensemen, and then segment 3, before I close things out, I'll take a look at the stats and analytics for both Arvid Soderblom and Peter Mrazek. And again, as a reminder, everything is always time-coded in the description for every single episode. So if you randomly want to start with the defenseman, can easily jump to that part in the episode instead of just having to scroll through the YouTube video. I make everything easy for you all by time coding everything down in the description. That goes for every single episode of Locked On Blackhawks. But to open things up with the Blackhawks forward group, it only makes sense to begin with number 98, the Blackhawks leading scorer, Connor Bedard, who has certainly picked up his production and brushed to the side all of those sophomore slump concerns with his play here as of late. Played in all 52 games for the Blackhawks so far this year, has 15 goals. We've seen a nice uptick in the goal scoring production out of Bedard in the last couple of months. He's tied for second on the team in goals. Yeah, it's still probably the number you want to see, but the progression compared to what it was at the beginning of the season has been really nice, and I hope he's going to make a run for 30 goals for the first time in his NHL career. Also, 30 assists for Connor Bedard through the opening 52 games. That's good for first among all Blackhawks skaters. Then, of course, he leads the team with 45 points as well. Looking at some of the other analytics and numbers here for Bedard, he is minus 24 on the season in terms of plus-minus rating. I apologize. I'm randomly getting my phone blown up in the middle in the middle of this and just don't want to make sure it's anything serious. No, it is not, and it can definitely wait. But Bedard is minus 24 in terms of plus-minus this year. I know that's a statistic a lot of Bedard haters will go and point at. I have one random Minnesota Wild fan who's definitely salty about Brock Faber not winning the Calder Trophy last year, who loves to point out Connor Bedard's plus-minus. I do think he has been more reliable defensively this year compared to his rookie campaign. Still, isn't an exquisite defensive player by any means, and I don't think that's ever going to be his forte, but he has, I think, done a good job of getting a little bit more rugged, playing a little bit harder and with more of an edge, and we've seen some physicality out of Connor Bedard. I'm not really concerned with his plus-minus on this Blackhawks team, considering the time on ice he averages 24 penalty minutes for Bedard as well. I would like to see him clean up some of his penalties, but at the same point in time, he gets all these ticky-tacky calls against him, but never seems to get a penalty call in his favor. It's like the NHL officials, are throwing some shade his way and are making him earn his stripes in the league, which I think is a little bit odd. But Bedard does have 9 even-strength goals on the year. That's tied for second among all Blackhawks skaters. Has chipped in for 6 power play goals as well, tied for second also. And that's one area where I've kind of criticized Bedard throughout the season. I want to see him be more dominant on the man advantage, and I do think he's done a better job of that here over the last month. Also, like to see the shooting percentage up, 12.2% now on the season for Bedard. if you listen to me on Deep Dive 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, I knew this shooting percentage number was going to go up eventually. He's just too talented of a shooter. And quite honestly, I still think there's room for growth. I think Bedard could get up to around 14% by the end of the year. 123 shots as well. That's first among all Blackhawks skaters. Still would like to see him be a little bit more selfish from time to time, considering he is the best shooter and offensive player on the team. Averaging 20 minutes and 4 seconds of time on ice. Most time on ice among all Blackhawks forwards. Has been a struggle continued for Bedard at the faceoff dot. Only won 33.8% of his draws. I do think he's actually, there's been like 4 or 5 games in a row, I believe, where he's been above 50%. So incremental improvements, something we will take, but definitely not a strong point in his game and has not climbed the way I would have wanted it to in his second NHL season. And then diving into the analytics, 44.2 Corsi for percentage for Bedard at even strength this year, been on the ice for 32 goals for to 40 goals against. So even though he does have that minus 24 plus minus rating, that's the difference right there. And he's been on the ice for a lot of shorthanded goals against. Some of them, yes, have been his fault, and he does need to clean up the decision making and does need to make better has to make better judgments in terms of when he can try to do things himself. But altogether, Connor Bedard, as a 19-year-old, still the leading point producer, the leading assist man for the Chicago Blackhawks. The playmaking development has been rather nice since he first stepped onto the scene. And again, the goal scoring is just starting to get going. 45 points in 52 games this year. Hopefully, Bedard can get that closer to a point-per-game margin when it's all said and done. Next, we go to Teuvo Teravainen, the second leading scorer on the Blackhawks. Has also played in all 52 games with 11 goals, 23 assists for 34 points. Those 23 assists are second on the Hawks, trailing only Mr. Connor Bedard. Minus 17 plus minus rating for Teuvo is what it is. Only 6 penalty minutes, though, which I think is noteworthy for a guy who can play on the penalty kill. Best ability is availability, so does a good job of staying out of the box and is, not maybe the most reliable forward as he used to be a couple of years ago, that he has to kind of do more things offensively for this Blackhawks squad, but still does a good job of holding his own on the defensive side of things and not winding up in the penalty box. My one criticism about Teuvo all year long is he only has 6 even-strength goals in 52 games this year. Nearly half of his goals, 5 of them, have come on the man advantage. Just need him to be better and more consistent at 5-on-5. 14.3 shooting percentage for Teuvo as well, converting at a nice clip, but he only has 77 shots in 52 games played. And I know goal scoring isn't and never will be his forte, but I think he has to be calling his own number more, particularly when this Blackhawks offense struggles to get goals as a whole. In terms of the analytics for Teuvo, 46.0 Corsi for percentage at even strength. That's actually among the Blackhawks leaders and has been on the ice for 25 goals for to 38 against at even strength. Again, needs to be a little bit better in terms of production at 5-on-5. Ryan Donato next, the third leading scorer for the Blackhawks, has played in 50 of the 52 games this year. Remember when Ryan Donato was being scratched early on in the year? What a joke that was. 15 goals for Donato. That's tied for second on the Blackhawks, and I believe he's 1 away from tying his career best. Also has chipped in with 15 assists, which is 4th among all Blackhawks skaters. 30 points and a -5 plus-minus rating for Ryan Donato. Second among all Blackhawks skaters who have played in at least 30 games this year. He's been great on the offensive side of things, and he's been reliable defensively too. This guy just plays the game the right way. Also love that 14 of his 15 goals have come from the even strength variety, the best 5-on-5 goal scorer for the Blackhawks this year. Only 1 goal has come on the power play. He's also shooting 13.6%, and I think that's noteworthy because it's a good percentage, and he has the second most shots on goal on the Blackhawks, trailing only Connor Bedard. There's nothing fancy about Ryan Donato, and I've said this time and time again when breaking down his game this year. It's simple. Get the puck to the net, drive the puck, crash the net for rebounds, and good things tend to happen to this guy, and he's been rewarded for it this year. Also done a good job winning 45.2% of his faceoffs for being a guy who probably isn't a true center iceman. Also is 3rd on the Blackhawks in hits with 85, has the best Corsi for percentage on the team at 46.6%. You see why Ryan Donato is going to be a very attractive trade piece for another NHL club. He's also been on the ice for 33 goals for to 36 against at even strength. Really fine 5-on-5 margin for Ryan Donato. Again, the most underappreciated member of the Blackhawks this year. Next, we got Tyler Bertuzzi, who has played in all 52 games, leads the Blackhawks with 17 goals, even though his hot streak has kind of cooled off here in the past week or two. 11 assists for Bertuzzi in 52 games played has really not given us all that much in the playmaking department. 28 points is good for fourth among all Blackhawks skaters. Minus 25 plus minus rating, though. And I know I didn't critique Bedard for having a bad plus minus rating, but I'm going to get on Tyler Bertuzzi a little bit because he's not the one who's driving play for his line more times than not. He's just kind of crashing the net and finishing up the loose scraps while also being completely lackluster on the defensive side of things. I mean, his even strength goals for to goals against margin, 28 goals for this year to 49 against. He's been so lackluster on the defensive side of things. And I get that's not his strength, but when this is a Blackhawks team that can't afford him to be like a black hole out there defensively, he's kind of let us down in that category. Does have 9 even strength goals, which is second among all Blackhawks skaters. Leads the team with 8 power play goals, shooting 19.3% because, like 80% of his shots come within 3 feet of the goaltender, but converting at a nice clip. Hasn't really scored on a lot of shots from his wrister or anything this year, but again, that's not his makeup. Averaging 16 minutes and 15 seconds of time on ice, only has 48 hits, and I know he's not like a big hitter, but I would have liked him to be a little bit more rugged this year. I mentioned the goals for to goals against margin, 44.5 Corsi for percentage for Bertuzzi this year. Doesn't drive play, hasn't been reliable defensively. Yeah, his goal scoring and play along with Bedard has been much needed, but again, these were the reasons I was concerned about giving this guy a 4-year contract at over $5.5 million, right? There's definitely some concerns about that. Next, we got Nick Foligno, who's played in 51 of the 52 games this year as the Blackhawks captain. Does have 11 goals and 12 assists for 23 points. Minus 13 plus minus rating has taken a dip really ever since Anders Sorensen stepped over, and his defensive prowess hasn't really been the same. Does have 9 even strength goals this year, which is tied for second among all Blackhawks skaters. Chipped in for 2 power play goals as well. Shooting 16.7%. This has been a theme I've talked about with the Blackhawks throughout these deep dives this year. Like, all of their forwards have a high shooting percentage. They just don't get enough shots off. Foligno only has 66 shots in 51 games this year, and I know he's not on lines that usually get a ton of time in the offensive zone, but whenever you get an opportunity, Nick, I think you got to do a better job of getting the puck on cage. Has done a really good job, though, at the faceoff dot for being a guy who's more of a winger. Team leading 51.4 faceoff win percentage this year. Also leads the team in hits with 130. Second best Corsi for percentage at 46.4%. And I know he hasn't been as reliable, again, since Sorensen stepped over, but he's still been one of the better and more reliable Blackhawks forwards on the season. Goes about business the right way more times than not. Provides a physical element, which this team really needs. Wins faceoffs, which this team really needs. Been on the ice for 31 goals for to 44 against. I'm going to cut Nick Foligno some slack because he's got a lot on his plate right now. Next, we got Jason Dickinson, also played in all 52 games this year. Has not really been the certified goal scorer that he was last year, with only 7 goals, 9 assists, and 16 points on the year. Is a -7, which is noteworthy for this Blackhawks squad. He is a defensive-minded center to an absolute T, and that's why Luke Richardson absolutely loved Jason Dickinson. One of the better shutdown center icemen in the entire game. All 7 of his goals this year have come from the even strength variety. Still shooting 14%. Again, another guy well into double digits, but only has 50 shots on goal in 52 games. For a guy who plays the center ice position, I mean, it's like, come on, Jason Dickinson. Got to give us more than that. Averaging 16 minutes and 7 seconds of time on ice. Has seen a nice uptick in his faceoff win percentage over the last few weeks, now up to 49.0% on the year. Second among all Blackhawks skaters in hits with 91, right behind Nick Foligno. 43.3 Corsi for percentage. Quite honestly, I think that's pretty indicative of the role that he plays and starts a lot in the defensive zone and defensive-minded situations, and has a pretty solid 29 goals for to 36 goals against ratio at even strength this year. Next, we go to Lukas Reichel, who's played in 45 of the 52 games, 4 goals, only 11 assists, 15 points. Has been producing a little bit more consistently since he's been elevated to the third line, which I think was the correct decision by this Blackhawks coaching staff. Here's an interesting stat for Lukas Reichel. He's -6 on the season, third among all Blackhawks skaters in that category. And again, I know that's not a very meaningful stat, but considering the roles Lukas Reichel has played, not in a lot of offensive-minded situations, They're trying to make him be a little bit more rugged and tougher to play against, and it honestly might be working. I was pretty surprised to see Lukas Reichel having this nice of a plus-minus rating, and also he's been on the ice for 16 goals for to only 20 against at even strength this year, so has been more reliable in the defensive zone, even though, again, I don't think that's ever going to be the strength of his game. Only has 10 penalty minutes as well. Not the most physical or engaged defensive player, but he's been better at that and still doesn't take a lot of penalties. All 4 of his goals have come from the even strength variety. Would love to see Lukas Reichel get more opportunities on the power play because of his speed and ability to carry the puck in the offensive zone. Been a problem for the Hawks all year long. Only shooting 8.0%. I believe he's actually the only Blackhawks skater I'll go through here from this forward group that's shooting below 10%. Only 50 shots on goal for Lukas Reichel in 45 games. Going to be more of a playmaker always, but I do think he is more capable of a scorer than we've seen so far this year. So I'd like to see him be a little bit more choosy in terms of getting the shot on net. Averaging 12 minutes and 19 seconds of time on ice. Getting a little bit more of an opportunity here recently on the third line. 140.1% of his draws. That's been trending in the right direction as of late. 42.1 Corsi for percentage, I know isn't the best, but I think that's also what makes his 16 goals for to 20 goals against ratio at even strength all the more impressive. Hasn't been starting a lot of zone starts in the offensive zone, Next, we got Ilya Mikheyev, who's played in 50 of the 52 games, 9 goals, 6 assists for 15 points. I've been actually pretty happy with Ilya Mikheyev this year. Leads the Blackhawks in plus-minus at -4. Really reliable defensive forward, also has some really good skating abilities. He's never going to be able to put the finished product together to be a consistent point producer, but he has enough offensive ability to play an offensive-minded role. He has the defensive instincts to be reliable defensively, can play on the penalty kill, really good speed and edge work to make quick turns and read plays and recognize, if he's got a trailing defenseman or an open teammate. I've been really thrilled with what I've seen from Ilya Mikheyev. 8 of his goals have come from the even strength variety, has one of the 2 shorthanded goals for the Hawks this year. Another guy shooting in the double digits at 11.4%, but only has 79 shots. Actually, that 79 shots is 4th among all Blackhawks skaters. So Ilya Mikheyev, for a guy who averages less than 15 minutes of time on ice per game, actually does a good job of shooting the puck compared to some other guys. 3rd on the Blackhawks with a 46.2 Corsi for percentage and has been on the ice for 27 goals for to 32 against. Some really solid metrics here for Ilya Mikheyev. He and Ryan Donato, to me, have been the 2 biggest sleeper Blackhawks all season long. The numbers continue to prove it. Last forward I'm going to get into here on segment 1, Blackhawks fans, is Frank the Tank Nazar, who has now played in enough games, I think, to have a good enough sample size to judge his numbers and analytics. Played in 23 games, has 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points, -2 plus-minus rating, which I think is noteworthy for the amount of games that he's played in. 8 penalty minutes, was really struggling in his first few games to stay out of the penalty box, but I don't think he has a penalty in his last 10 or 11 games now, which is noteworthy. All 3 of his goals have come from the even strength variety. Also like to see that he's shooting 10.3% and has 29 shots on goal in those 23 games played. I still think there's room for him to grow in that department and shooting the puck on net a little bit more. Averaging 14 minutes and 36 seconds of time on ice. His role has kind of been up and down. Seen him on the top line, and they had some success there, but it looks like the Blackhawks are going to be separating that top line for now, and Nazar is going to be playing the center ice position again, where naturally, he has struggled at the dot. He's only won 39.4% of his faceoffs. Looking at the analytics, 40.3 Corsi for percentage, not the best, but has been on the ice for 14 goals for to only 15 against. And I think the reason that number is so close is because Frank does make an effort on the defensive side of things. He is someone who has a high motor and plays with a two-way game. He uses his speed on both sides of the ice. His addition to that top line I thought was really noticeable for a handful of games, and he's clearly one of the most skilled and talented players already on the Blackhawks. With his forechecking ability, despite the lack of size, again, the motor and the hustle. I called the kid the Energizer Bunny the first time I saw him on the ice because he's just got his hands all over everything. If it's a skirmish along the boards, Frank Nazar is going to be in there. If it's a penalty kill, Nazar's out there. 5-on-3 power play, Nazar's out there for the team trying to score a goal. The extra attacker out there in a late needed goal situation, Frank Nazar's out there. He's a jack of all trades type of guy, and I've been really impressed with what I've seen. And I think he's just going to continue to get more and more comfortable and produce regularly as he continues to get some more experience, I should say, under his belt. Do want to let you all know there are a handful of players I am not going to get to in Blackhawks Deep Dive 5.0. One of them, Craig Smith, who hasn't played a game since early January, so there's no update there since Deep Dive 4.0. Pat Maroon, I think, has only played 2 games since my last Deep Dive. Philip Kurashev barely plays, and we know the narrative on him, so there's nothing really to break down on today's episode. And then Colton Dach just has not racked up enough of a sample size in terms of games to break down his stats and analytics, but I do believe if he continues to get in the lineup, should have a large enough sample size for Deep Dive 6.0 on the Chicago Blackhawks here in a couple of weeks. But there is my breakdown on the stats and analytics, all the numbers for the Blackhawks forward group through 52 games this season. Coming up in just a minute, I'll talk about Seth Jones, Alex Vlasic, and the Blackhawks defensemen. Real quick, though, I do got to let you all know about the fine folks over at FanDuel and the tremendous offer that they have right now ahead of Super Bowl 59, which is right around the corner. 1 game, 2 teams, and endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Because whether it's predicting the first touchdown, naming the MVP, or even betting on the opening coin toss, FanDuel now makes it so easy to get in on the action. Because with live betting all game long, you can now adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff up until the final whistle. And the live betting feature also lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is truly so simple and easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place just a $5 bet and win $200 worth of bonus bets for Super Bowl 59, that's the icing on the cake. So to take advantage of this amazing offer, make sure to go and visit FanDuel.com right now or download the FanDuel app to get started today. And again, if you put $5 down, when that first $5 bet wins, you'll get $200 worth of bonus bets. Again, that's FanDuel.com to bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. Segment 2, picking up where I left off and transitioning from the forwards to the defensemen here on Blackhawks Deep Dive 5.0. Let's start with none other than the most critiqued member of this Blackhawks blue line, sometimes rightfully so, sometimes, most of the time, very not the case. Seth Jones, number 4, who has been awesome for this Blackhawks blue line ever since that disaster that he had a few Mondays ago against the Calgary Flames, where there are a bunch of trade rumors picking up as a result. We've heard the Colorado Avalanche have potentially kicked the tires on Jones, the Vancouver Canucks as well. They just traded JT Miller, but who knows if they're going to be done selling or trying to take on another player. There have been a lot of rumors involving Seth Jones the last few weeks, but I'll tell you what, Blackhawks fans, he's silenced a lot of the criticism and the critiques about his play with how well he's fared on the ice. And again, it's just a reminder, something I've been preaching on the show really for the last 3 years, and it's that Seth Jones has the best skill set on this Blackhawks blue line, and when he's playing the right way and playing consistently, there's no denying the impact that he makes on this Blackhawks squad, and there's no other defenseman that the Hawks have right here, right now, that can make the same type of impact that Seth Jones does. They just don't have the same type of talent level. They don't have the same frame, the same skating ability, the same offensive vision. And listen, Seth Jones, yes, is still a liability in the defensive zone from time to time and is probably not a true top pairing defenseman for the lack of consistency that he has in the defensive zone. But I feel like he's been much more engaged in his own end, a lot more physical, both in front of the net and along the boards. I think his stick has been much more active. He's done a better job of trying to box guys out in the dirty areas. Again, it's never going to be perfect because that's not Seth Jones's makeup. And if he wasn't making $9.5 million a year, if that number was at $6.5 million, where it probably should be, no one would be batting an eye and everyone would be happy with the type of performances that Seth Jones Seth Jones is rattling off. Like, the only reason that people are so mad at this guy is because of the price tag that he signed for, and I just don't really understand it. Like, there are legitimate people out there who think Seth Jones is a bad hockey player, and if you're one of those people watching this video, then, like, I don't know what to tell you. You should probably go get your eyes checked. And the only reason that people have these feelings or these tainted judgments of how he plays is because of the contract. Again, he does have those terrible performances from time to time, and I think since he's joined on with the Blackhawks, his lack of consistency out of the gate has been the biggest problem. But let's go ahead and dive into the numbers here for Seth Jones on the season. Played in 35 games for the Blackhawks this year. Of course, he missed a handful of contests due to injury, but played in 35 of the 52 games. He has 5 goals, 19 assists, excuse me. Those 19 assists, by the way, are still third among all Blackhawks skaters, despite only having played in 35 games. And his 24 points is 6th among all Blackhawks skaters as well. Like, Seth Jones has been a consistent producer when he has been healthy, and I think it was even funny that, well, it was just like a terrible defensive game against the Calgary Flames, he did even pick up a point in that one to kind of kickstart a nice point streak that he went on following that horrible performance. And during that stretch after the game against Calgary, he was the highest producing defenseman in the NHL for a couple of weeks there. So I would just love if we pump the tires on the Seth Jones hate and like everyone like, please trade this guy to Dallas. Let's beg for it and make it happen on social. Like, to me, if you're one of those people who are doing that, it tells me you don't know ball. Hate to say it. But Seth Jones has 24 points in 35 games this year, -9 plus-minus rating, which I think is even respectable for the amount of minutes that he plays, again, on one of the worst teams in all of hockey. His plus-minus rating has been a lot worse than that in past seasons, and he's gotten absolutely dogged for it. Also only has 14 penalty minutes, which I think is noteworthy. 7 penalties on the year in 35 games for a guy who's among the leading ice time leaders in the entire NHL. 2 even-strength goals, 3 power play goals. I think he's done a good job of getting pucks on net, too. He has 66 shots in 35 games. He's the best at that for sure among all Blackhawks defensemen. Shooting 7.6%, which is pretty good for a blue liner and much better than some of the numbers he's had in the past few seasons. I mentioned team leading 24 minutes and 40 seconds of time on ice. He's also third on the team with 68 blocks despite playing in 35 games. Here's a stat for you Blackhawks fans. Seth Jones has 68 blocks in 35 games. TJ Brodie has 52 blocks in 47 games this year. Pathetic. 49 hits from Seth Jones as well, like been a little bit more physical than he usually is, as I mentioned earlier. 45.3 Corsi for percentage among the Blackhawks leaders, first among all Blackhawks defensemen, and he's been on the ice for 35 goals for to 40 goals against. Again, for a guy who plays nearly half the game on a woeful Blackhawks team, like, these are respectable, very respectable numbers for Seth Jones. I really hate how much the narrative has been spun against this guy because he's having a really solid season outside of maybe 2 or 3 games when he's been healthy. Next, we go to Alex Vlasic. He has played in all 52 games for the Blackhawks this year. 2 goals, 15 assists for 17 points. The offense has really dried up over the last few weeks, especially since Seth Jones returned and he's not getting as much time on the power play. The plus-minus number has also taken a little bit of a hit for Vlasic. I mean, -12 isn't anything crazy in the wrong direction, but has been trending downward. Only 8 penalty minutes, again, is probably the most noteworthy thing about Vlasic. Guy who averages second on the team, 23 minutes and 45 seconds of time on ice. Starts in more defensive situations than Seth Jones does and only has 4 penalties in 52 games. That's pretty incredible. Only 1 even-strength goal, though, for Vlasic in 52 games. Chipped in for 1 power play goal. So, again, even though he is the most reliable defenseman the Blackhawks have, not nearly the same type of offensive upside as Seth Jones. Also only shooting 2.7%, and I think he has done a good job of putting pucks on cage. 75 shots is first among all Blackhawks defensemen this year. 101 blocks, Vlasic leads the team in that category. Chipped in with 42 hits. I have someone who keeps commenting on my posts on X saying, like, Louis Crevier needs to be more physical. Why isn't the same being said about Alex Vlasic? Listen, you don't need to be 6'7" and super physical. Yeah, it's nice to have that bonus, but it's mostly just how about you can use your frame to separate players from the puck and give yourself that extra second to get the puck out of harm's way. Alex Vlasic does that better than any defenseman on this team, and some of the best I've seen in the NHL. Also leads the Blackhawks with 35 takeaways. And the second most on the team is Connor Bedard with 16. So no one takes the puck away from the opponent more on this Hawks squad than Alex Vlasic does. 42.8 Corsi for percentage, I think, is a symptom of the role that he plays. Has done a good job, been on the ice for 43 goals for. That's good offensive uptick, and only 55 goals against. Next up, we go to the old man, TJ Brodie, who's played in 47 of the 52 games this year, still getting way too much ice time and playing way too regularly for my liking. 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points for Brodie this year. Honestly, I'll give him credit. That's more production than I thought we'd have at this point of the season. Minus 18 plus minus rating, though, is an absolute liability defensively. 14 penalty minutes doesn't really go to the box all that much, but I don't think he's nearly as engaged as like Alex Vlasic is on his opponents. Both of Brody's goals have come from the even strength variety. He's shooting 10% on the year, but that's because he only has 20 shots on goal in 47 games. Doesn't offer very much of anything in the offensive zone, averaging 15 minutes and 53 seconds of time on ice, basically the same ice time the Blackhawks are giving Nolan Allen in his rookie year. I think that's a pretty good sign of how untrusted he is by this coaching staff. Only 52 blocks in 47 games, only has 14 hits, so provides nothing physically. Does actually have decent analytics, I'll give him that. 45.1 Corsi for percentage, but the real kicker, 19 goals for to 37 against. An absolutely awful ratio. Cannot believe that we have TJ Brodie signed on for another year at $3.75 million. Next, we go to Nolan Allen. Played in 41 of the Blackhawks' 52 games so far this year. Did score his first NHL goal and chipped in for 7 assists with 8 points, minus 13 plus minus rating. About as advertised. Only 16 penalty minutes, which I think has been solid for a guy like Nolan Allen, who you know is physically engaged and can crunch guys along the boards, not taking a ton of penalties for a guy who's in his first NHL campaign, shooting 6.7%, only 15 shots on goal this year out of Nolan Allen. Like, really gives you nothing to work with offensively, and that's why a guy like Wyatt Kaiser and even Ethan Del Mastro are a little bit more intriguing to me than Nolan Allen is. Averaging 15 minutes and 12 seconds of time on ice, has chipped in for 41 block shots, 59 hits as well. The physicality has been a nice bonus. 42.1 Corsi for percentage, been on the ice for 20 goals for. Again, not a ton offensively that Nolan Allen gives you, to 34 against at even strength. Next, we go to Alec Martinez, who's played in 25 of the 52 games, just barely a big enough sample size to look at some of his numbers. I think for the first time this year, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points for Alec Martinez. Is a -5 in 25 games, mostly playing alongside Seth Jones in a sizable role. So that's noteworthy. Only 4 penalty minutes, 2 penalties in 25 games for Martinez. That's noteworthy. 23 shots on goal, 8.7 shooting percentage. I think both of those 2 goals, though, have come in his last 10 contests with the Blackhawks. So providing a little bit more offensively here as of late, but not really known for his offense as he's getting close to 40 years of age. Is averaging 20 minutes and 1 second of time on ice, probably a bit higher than I thought when the Blackhawks first signed him. Is 4th on the team with 63 blocks despite only playing in 25 games. Like, this guy has more blocks than TJ Brodie, and he's got double the amount of games that he does this year. It's pathetic. 14 hits for Alec Martinez, the same amount of hits that TJ Brodie does. He's not a very physical guy either, but still finds a way to chip in. 40.7 Corsi for percentage makes sense for the defensive-minded role. Been on the ice for 19 goals for to 23 against. Basically the same exact number as Seth Jones. Those two have been really solid with one another. And then to round things out, the Blackhawks blue line, the man who is currently on injured reserve, Louis Crevier, has now played in 23 games this season, 3 goals. Only 1 assist, though, for 4 points, but nice to see him produce in the goal-scoring department. Has taken 5 penalties, 10 penalty minutes in those 23 games, so needs to clean things up a little bit for being a big guy in his own end. Shooting 13.0% and 23 shots in 23 games. Like, all of that is kind of gravy, because I thought Louis Crevier would never provide anything, even if he was going to become an NHLer, which was a long shot in and alone of itself. Averaging 17 minutes and 48 seconds of time on ice, higher than Allen, higher than Brodie. I know he's playing with Vlasic, but clearly Anders Sorensen has some trust in Big Lou, and they spent a lot of time together down in Rockford, so he's very familiar with his game. 34 blocks for Crevier, 47 hits in 23 games is really good stuff. 41.4 Corsi for percentage, 11 goals for to only 13 against, though. Handling his own really well, and we'll see what winds up happening when he gets healthy. If it's going to be he or Ethan Del Mastro going back, probably going to be Ethan Del Mastro. But Crevier's handled himself well. Honestly, he might even be more impressive than what we've seen from Nolan Allen this year. Seth Jones, Alex Vlasic, Alec Martinez when he has been healthy. Those have been the 3 best defensemen for the Blackhawks all season long. Louis Crevier probably sneakily has been the 4th, even though he's only played in 23. Well, Connor Murphy's not involved here, I guess I should say, because he's been injured for a while. Not getting to Murph either on Deep Dive 5.0. He's been one of the better defensemen for the Blackhawks, of course, when healthy this year. But I'd put Louis Crevier right up there ahead of both Nolan Allen, and TJ Brody. But there is my deep dive on the Blackhawks defensemen. Coming up in just a moment, before I close things out, I'll take a look at the numbers for Arvid Soderblom and Peter Mrazek. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen, here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates down the stretch with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily go and find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, going over the Blackhawks goalies, stats and analytics here really quick. Obviously, there's only 2 to get to. We'll start with number 34, Peter Mrazek, who was phenomenal as the starter for the Blackhawks last year. Got off to a really good first half of the season, but unfortunately, the nagging groin injury flared up once again for him. That's been something that's plagued him as he's gotten into his 30s, and ever since then, the consistency has just not been there. Mrazek's appeared in 30 games this year. All 30 have been starts. He's got a 9-18-2 record, and because of the lack of consistency here as of late, the numbers have kind of started to drift in the wrong direction. 3.32 goals against average on the season, .895 save percentage, no shutouts, 15 quality starts in his 30 games worth of action with a minus 6.0 goals saved above expected. That's 73rd in the NHL. Now, I don't think Peter Mrazek's play has been as bad as the numbers indicate, but make no mistake about it, he has not been the same guy ever since suffering that groin injury. And the guy I'm about to talk about, Arvid Soderblom, has really stepped in my opinion, cemented himself as the number one the rest of the way. He's played in 23 games now on the season, made 21 starts. The 7-12-3 record won't tell you what you need to know about this guy. You got to go and look at the save percentage and the goals against. 2.89 goals against. I know that's only 37th in the NHL, but again, to me, that's still noteworthy considering where Soderblom was the years prior, and also compared to Peter Mrazek, who's at 3.32. Soderblom still in the top 40 of the NHL, but he's 16th in save percentage with a .909 save percentage in 23 games this year, regularly getting peppered and having to make 40 to 45 saves just to give his Blackhawks team the chance, and he's been game more times than not, man. Really good stuff out of Arvid Soderblom. Only 11 of his 21 starts have been graded as quality starts, but that's kind of a wonky stat for goaltenders. Real good metric, though, to close things out. 5.0 goals saved above expected, 23rd in the NHL out of Arvid Soderblom, inside the top 25 in that statistic and save percentage. And oh yeah, the kid's still only 25 years old. That's going to round out today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Hope you enjoyed Deep Dive 5.0. Make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at JackBushman2. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.